So we're 10 days away from. It's nice to see all of you. Nice group of people. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Oh, see, that's good. That's nice. Somebody said this congregation wasn't trainable, and I said that's not true, and I'm right. There's a national holiday in 10 days. It's my birthday. And if you're inclined to buy me a present, and you don't have to, and I don't expect anything, but I prefer something with like 4 wheels and a key. So if you're so inclined. Anyway, good. Nice to see all of you. Shabbat shalom. I guess we should get started. Oh yes, and to all of you who are streaming, Shabbat Shalom to you too. Yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai lai lai, yai 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 lai lai. Yai la 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 la, yai la la la, yai la 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 la, yai la la la, yai la 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 la, yai la 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 la, yai la 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 la. 2, 3, 4. Yai la 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 la. Yai la la la, yai la la la, yai la la, yai la la, yai la la la, yai la la la, yai la la la, yai la 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 la. Yismachu hashamayim v'tageh haaretz. Yeah, that's. It's a nigun doesn't have any words, but sometimes those words get thrown in. Ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. And we begin with lighting the candles. Please come forward. And we are on page 2. I should remember that. Whenever you're ready, go right ahead.
May the light of these Shabbat candles cause us all to see each other as part of our shared community. May the light of these Shabbat candles glow with our warm feelings for all the members of our congregation.
May the light of these Shabbat candles help us to recognize the needs of others and show us a way to help them.
May the light of these Shabbat candles help lift the spirits of ourselves and others.
And in the glow of these Shabbat candles, may we bond together to become an even better, caring community.
Baruch atah Adonai,
Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Bim, bam, bim. Let me start again. Hold on a sec, sorry. Bim, bam, bim, 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 bam. Bim, 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 bam. La, 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 la. Bim, bam, bim, 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 bam. Bim, 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 bam. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. So do me a favor, take a few decades off of your age. I won't tell you how many, but we're now a bunch of 7-year-olds, okay? And we're singing this like 7-year-olds, which is a little more enthusiastic. And you're permitted to say hey if you like. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, oi, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom, Bim Bam, Bim 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 Bam, Bim 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 Bam. So, Hine Matov. In case you need the words, we are on page 10.
Hine ma tov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine shevet achim gam yachad, hine ma tov, shevet achim gam yachad, hine ma tov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad, hine ma tov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad.
David? Ma yafeh hayom Shabbat Shalom.
Ma yafeh hayom Shabbat Shalom. Ma yafeh hayom Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
So this version, or this piece of Yedid Nefesh, is part of a longer poem that is at the very beginning of the Kabbalat Shabbat service in traditional synagogues. But this is a nice component of it. Heart's delight, source of mercy, draw your servant into your arms. I leap like a deer to stand in awe before you. Yedid nefesh av harachaman, Yedid nefesh av harachaman, mishoch avdecha, eretz onecha, mishoch avdecha, la 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 la, eretz onecha. Yarutz avdecha kemo haya, ishtachave la la la, la 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 la, el mul hadarecha. Yarutz avdecha kemo נשתחווה לי, אל מוהדרך. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaShoret. We are on page 24.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei HaMlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bochem Shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei HaMlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bachuni l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei HaMlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzidchem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei HaMlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
L'cha dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat mikabala, page 20.
Lecha dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 b'nei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 b'nei Shabbat nikabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad hishmiyanu El HaMeyuchad, Adonai Echad, Ushmo Echad, L'Shem Utiferet V'nitila. Lecha dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 b'nei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 b'nei Shabbat nikabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha ki hi makor habracha merosh mikedem nesucha sof maaseh b'machshava techila. Lecha dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 b'nei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 b'nei Shabbat nikabela.
Please rise.
Boi v'shalom ateret bala gam b'simcha ubzola toch emunei am segula boi chala Lecha dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 b'nei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala yalalai 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 b'nei Shabbat nikabela.
When Shabbat Queen has passed by and the verse is over, please feel free to be seated. All right. Even now, you may feel free to be seated, except for Alyssa, who's about to sing Am I Awake?
Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya
Have a
la
kiss.
la la la, ya la 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 la.
You get two because you had surgery.
Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la
Have a kiss.
la la. Am I
Have a piece of chocolate.
awake?
Hi.
Am I prepared? Are you
Where'd your husband go?
listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Do you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared?
Oh, please rise. The King.
Leolam vaed.
Pass it down.
Ya la 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 la, 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 ya la 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 la.
Please be seated. I apologize, I underestimated the length of the song. Or maybe was it overestimated? What? We are on page 30. Together. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are a creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness, darkness from light, transforming day into night, and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tsevaot is your name. Ever living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Uma'avir yom u'mevi laila, umavdil ben yom u'bein laila. Adonai Tsevaot Shemo, El Chai v'Kayam, Tamid Yimlocha Alenu Leolam va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai, Hama'ariva Ravim. Page 34, please rise for the Shema.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad.
Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levavecha ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם מאוד על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Together, page 37. Love your God with every heartbeat, with every breath, with every conscious act. Keep in mind the words I command you today. Teach them to your children. Talk about them at work, whether you are tired or you are rested. Let them guide the work of your hands. Keep them in the forefront of your vision. Do not leave them at the doorway of your house or outside your gate. They are reminders to do all of my mitzvot, so that you can be holy for God. I am Adonai, your God. I led you out of Egypt to become your God. I am Adonai, your God. Adonai Elohechem Emet. Together, the bottom of page 39. In a world torn by violence and pain, a world in peace, give us the courage to say, Adonai, there is one God in heaven and earth. The high heavens declare your glory. May earth reveal your justice and love. From bondage in Egypt we were delivered. At Sinai we bound ourselves to your way. Inspired by prophets and instructed by sages, time and again we overcame oppressive forces. Though our failings are many and our faults are great, it has been our glory to bear witness to our God, keeping alive in dark ages your vision of a world redeemed. Let us continue to work for the day when nations will be one and at peace. Then shall we rejoice, as Israel did, singing on the shores of the sea. Page 40.
Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 ya la 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 la. Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nehedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osefele, nora tehilot osefele. Malachutecha ra'u banecha, hokea yam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, ze'eli anu ve'amru, ze'eli anu ve'amru. Adonai yimloch le'olam ba'ed, Adonai yimloch le'olam ba'ed. Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nehedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osefele, nora tehilot osefele.
Sing.
Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 ya la 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 la.
Didn't mean to cut you off, sorry. Sing the song of men and women joined in understanding and respect. The song of God's miracles, an earth protected and cherished, a gift for our children and the generations to come. The song of a land once ravished by war, now quiet and content. Her soldiers home to leave no more. The song of a world redeemed, the song of peace. Top of page 43, join me together, join in with me. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up, waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim. The Shamaru, page 44.
V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני, עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וילפש, שבת וילפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
Adonai, open my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Page 46, please rise.
Anananananana Adonai, Ananananana Svatai Tiftach, Ananananana Ufi Yagid, Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha, Ananananana Adonai, Ananananana Svatai Tiftach, Ananananana Ufi Yagid, Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, Be'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Leah, Elohei Rachel, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor, V'hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chastei Avot V'imachot, U'mevii Geula Livnei V'neihem Lema'an Shemo B'yahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch Ata Adonai, Magen Avraham v'Ezrat Sarah. Ata Gibor Leolam Adonai, Mechaye HaKol Atarav Lehoshia, Morid Hatal. V'chakel Chaim Bechesed, Mechaye HaKol Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Berofei Cholim, Umatir Adonai, Umekayem emunato lishene afar, Micha mocha ba'agivurot, Umido melach, Melech memit, Umechaye, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman ata l'hachayot hakol, Baruch ata Adonai, Mechaye HaKol. Together, please, top of page 53. Days pass and the years vanish, and we walk sightless among miracles. O God, fill our eyes with seeing and our minds with knowing. Let there be moments when your presence, like lightning, illumines the darkness in which we walk. Help us to see wherever we gaze that the bush burns unconsumed, and we, clay touched by God, will reach out for holiness and exclaim in wonder, how filled with awe is this place, and we did not know it. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. Please be seated. So I was reading an email that I received on somebody's list, and the subject was gratitude. By the way, please turn to page 58. The subject was gratitude, and it referred to the term that you learned from Musar, but it precedes Musar, or hakarat hatov. Hakarat hatov. So the word tov you probably recognize. Hakara means to recognize. So it's the recognition of the good. The recognition that something good has happened in the world, something good has happened to us personally, or to somebody we know. And so in that sense, I'll ask you, if you would, to share something hakarat hatov, something that happened this week for which you are particularly grateful. Yes?
I got to spend time with my family on vacation in New York City. The best part was that Mom joined us, and we drove her all over the city all day, and she was a trooper. Wound up flat on her back the next day, but she didn't stop.
Well, with a hat like that on her head, I would imagine she led you through the city. So it's a good thing. Last week you were grateful that you were going. Now you're grateful that you went. So it wasn't a guarantee that you'd be grateful, but you had a good time. And then we dragged you to 4 hours of meetings today. Anybody else have anything about which they're grateful? Yes, ma'am.
I'm grateful that we have musical accompaniment for the summer, and I give kudos to our congregants and our professional choirs.
Thank you. All right. Musical. Well, now you all raise your hand. Okay, something good had to have happened to you this week. It's really hard to. Yes, ma'am. Good and loud. You got a mask on.
I'm grateful that my best friend is recovering from surgery.
All right. So a friend is recovering from surgery. Like that. It's an ordinary things happen in a week for which we're grateful. Yeah.
We had the opportunity to move Z into Temple University on Thursday.
I missed that. You had the opportunity to do what at Temple?
I moved my daughter Z into Temple University.
All right. Something about Z. Is that a? Oh, it's your daughter. Oh, I'm sorry. You saw your daughter. So you took her there, or you saw her there?
We moved her in.
Moved her in. Freshman? First year?
Actually,
Junior. Okay. All right. Yeah, I got a warm spot in my heart for Temple. My in-laws went to Temple and they majored in journalism, and they met each other on the steps of the journalism school. At least that's the story. And B, I went to Temple for 2 years doing undergraduate and graduate work as a way to get into rabbinical school. So I have a warm spot in my heart for Temple, especially I can't remember the floor of the building, but the building where the religion department is located. So like that. Anybody else? Anything happened this week? No? Well, I'm grateful to be here. And although, rabbis sometimes get some flack for speaking politics. I am enormously grateful for that bill that was passed and signed a couple of weeks ago, because it sets us up to do something significant for the environment, about which we are all worried, and about which I was worried that America would not get to do something about, but we seem to be on the way to do some significant things. Yes, good and loud.
I read this wonderful, funny, charming, poignant book.
Oh, do tell. Oh, let's see, I'm getting good local reviews for my novel. Thank you. Yeah, Nick Bones Underground, available, and a Kindle for $6 or $20 for the softcover. Yes, ma'am. See, brilliant. Poignant, brilliant. I can live with the remarks like that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Any other, not necessarily reviews of my novel, but anything else? All right. Well, let's take a breath, and we'll come back. No, we'll do Shalom Rav first, and then we'll take a breath. Page 60.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov b'einecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam.
Now just to pause for a moment, catch your breath, catch our breath. And note, by the way, that each version of the Amidah, which the prayer that we're just finishing, concludes with a prayer for peace. This is the one for the evening, and I want to say the afternoon service. And the morning service is Sim Shalom, which you probably know. But they're both prayers for peace, and the Chatimah, the closing line, in both versions is Baruch Atah Adonai HaMevorech et Amo Yisrael Ba'Shalom. We praise the eternal God who blesses God's people, Israel, and the world with peace. Pause for a moment. Oseh Shalom.
Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh Shalom Alenu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh Shalom Alenu, ve'akol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Oseh Shalom bimromav, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
We are on page 258. For our congregation together. Source of all being, may the children of this community learn these passions from us. Love of Torah, devotion and prayer, support of the needy. May we guide with integrity, and may our leadership be in your service. May those who teach and nourish us be blessed with satisfaction, and may we appreciate their time and their devotion. Bless us with the fruits of wisdom and understanding, and may our efforts bring fulfillment and joy. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otcha levadcha b'yirah na'avod. For our country, just the first one. Thus says Adonai, this is what I desire, to unlock the fetters of wickedness and cords of lawlessness. Let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke. Share your bread with the hungry and take the wretched poor into your home. When you see the naked, give clothing, and do not ignore your own kin. If you banish the yoke from your midst, the menacing hand, the evil speech, if you offer compassion to the hungry and satisfy the famished creature, then your light shall shine in darkness. I think I now have a full bottle of water appears beneath the pulpit every week, but whoever does this, thank you very much. Avinu shebashamayim, tzur Yisrael v'goalo, borechet medinat Yisrael, reshit smichat geulatenu. Together, bottom of page 259. Heavenly One, protector and redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel. Guiding them with your good counsel, establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen. This evening, we bring to mind members of our community who are sick and in need of healing. Bobby Hamill, Peggy Stetner, Ellery Einstein, Susan Scarce, Ruth Nathanson, Miriam Alexander, Natalie Milrod, Rhoda Stark, Ed Michael, Mac Beeson, Carolyn Hoffman, Wilbur Nichols, Barry Cohen, Sue Goldman, Jamie Gordon Rodriguez, and Elsbeth Heyman. Any other names in this side of the room you want to mention? Anybody else you care to bring to mind? We continue on page 253, Misha Berach.
Misha Berach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Thank you. So again, Shabbat Shalom. So nice to see so many of you here this evening. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. So, if you read my column that I sent out this week, you know I want to talk about Midrash. And I don't want to, and I'm not really prepared to go into a long discussion of Midrash's literature, its history, its different focuses, and so forth. But I think it's worth noting that, as I said in what I sent out today, that when you talk about Midrash, you're talking about not a huge, but a large body of literature. I mean, but by not as large, I mean, if you compare it to the 35 volumes of the Talmud, I don't think, and then the Talmud's many commentaries. Midrash is smaller than that, but that doesn't mean it's not important. It's an important body of literature. And it's particularly important, I think, historically, for liberal Jews, and especially Reform Jews. Why? Because the Talmud leads into the Jewish legal system. And while there are aspects of the Jewish legal system that Reform Judaism pays very careful attention to, broadly speaking, the legal system really isn't ours. We kind of gave that up sometime at the beginning of the 19th century, if I got my dates right. The beginning of the 20th century, the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. There was a kind of a historical struggle, but by the time Reform arrived in America, it really wasn't a movement that paid much attention to halakha, to Jewish law. But it does pay, rabbis and scholars and lay people like the Midrash. They like Midrashic literature, or another word for it. It's not exactly a synonym, but it's close enough, Agadah or Agada. We like it because it's sort of freewheeling. It's kind of I like to describe it as postmodern literature, 150, 200, well, it's much older, going back millennia, but our use of it precedes postmodernism by a good 150 years or so. What do I mean by that? I mean that the parts of Midrash that we like so much consist in these stories that take biblical and sometimes rabbinic characters and kind of rewrite them. And in rewriting them, we understand something about perhaps what the biblical text was trying to tell us, and that's part of what I'm going to talk about. But it also gives us permission to do what these rabbis did. By the way, when somebody says the rabbis, you know they're like the Midrash. When we say the rabbis, we're talking about men who occupied a period of time from around the end of the 1st century to the 6th or 7th century, because it references a certain group of rabbinic scholars who wrote the Mishnah, wrote the Talmud, wrote commentaries, wrote the responsive literature. So when I say the rabbis here, I mean it really quite broadly. When I say the rabbis of today, like us Reform guys and women, I'm referring to the fact that we resonate quite well with this literature. So I want to tell you two midrashim. One I'm going to read as it appears in the text, and then I'm going to tell you what I think it says, and then I'm going to tell the other story, and I'm going to tell you what I think it says also. Now, you're free to disagree with my interpretation, but I want you to see what I think is going on with these two particular stories, and then more broadly with this whole body of literature, at least with respect to the stories that come out of this literature. So the first one, you're going to see how some rabbi, some individual, a rabbi, maybe a couple of rabbis, took one verse from the 2nd chapter of the book of Exodus and wove a whole story out of it. And we're going to see what the story says. So this one I'm going to read as it appears in the text. A certain man, this is the first verse of the 2nd chapter of the book of Exodus. A certain man of the house of Levi went and took into his household as a wife a woman of Levi. Did Amram, that's already an assumption. The text doesn't name the person, but It's assumed that it's Amram, Moses' father. Did Amram, the man referred to in the verse, go anywhere? No, he didn't go anywhere. So taught Rabbi Yehuda bar Zavina. But Amram went and acted upon his daughter's advice. He, as is well known, was the most eminent man of his generation. Aware that Pharaoh had decreed, every son that is born you shall cast into the Nile, he said, we labor in vain, meaning we shouldn't have any kids. That's the kind of labor. What he really means is our wives labor in vain, but okay. We labor in vain, and was the first to divorce his wife. At that, because he was the leader and influenced people, all the others divorced their wives, which means no marriage, no sexual intercourse, no kids. Amram says, I'm not going to have any kids because one might be a son and they're going to die. But his daughter said to him, Father, your decree is more cruel than Pharaoh's. For Pharaoh had decreed only against males, while you decree against both males and females. Pharaoh decreed only concerning this world, while you decree concerning both this world and the world to come. Now, since Pharaoh is a wicked man, there's doubt whether his decree will or will not be fulfilled. But since you are a righteous man, your decree is sure to be fulfilled. At once, Amram went and took back his wife, and so did all the others. Now, there really is a lot here. There's a lot more than I want to talk about now. Maybe in a class we can unpack this a little more. But note, first of all, how the darshan, which is what we call a person who writes a midrash, note how the darshan took one verse and wove a whole story out of it. We don't know Amram. We don't know Amram until much later. We don't know that he was the leader, and we don't know that Amram was the leader of the house of Levi. The rabbis assume, well, he's Moses' father, so he must be the leader of all the Israelites, because only the leader of the Israelites would be worthy to be the father of the man who was ultimately the liberator. So he divorces his wife. Everybody divorces his wife. And the daughter, and who's the daughter? Somebody tell me what his daughter's name is? Say it louder, you're right. Miriam. Okay, just making sure. Miriam comes and says, Dad, there's a couple things about what you just did. Now note, of course, that Miriam is already alive. So she's the much older sister, since this would make her easily a teenager to talk like the way she does. Dad, Pharaoh just said about the boys. You're saying about the boys and the girls. If this happens, Dad, there won't be any Israelites. We'll die out in a generation. Now, of course, if Pharaoh continues to drown the boys, the generation, the Israelites would end too. She says, not only that, Dad, but he said just about the boys. You're saying about the boys and the girls. And not only that, Dad, but Pharaoh's only decreeing about this world. Now, this is a worldview in which there's such a thing as heaven after you die. You are preventing anybody who was born within the Israelite community not to go to heaven. You're really not just wiping us out, but you're punishing us. Not only that, Dad, but Pharaoh's a bad guy. He's a terrible guy, right? So who knows if this decree of his is going to be totally carried out. And so Amram looks at Miriam and says, Daughter, you're right. And he calls the rabbi, and they get a chuppah together, and they break the glass, they have a nice marriage, and suddenly all the other Israelite men are marrying back their wives, and the story then proceeds. Now, that story is kind of nice in and of itself, but note, who's the hero of this story? A woman, the daughter. Miriam is the one. The father is his decision makes some sense, but really, it doesn't really make so much sense. The daughter is the wise person in this story. And also, now I don't know that the darshan, and remember the word darshan means a guy who writes a midrash. I don't know if the darshan knew what I'm about to tell you, if this was part of what he had on his mind. But if you think about this story, the second chapter of the book of Exodus, and you all know the story, Moses is born, Moses is doomed to die. Mom makes a basket and puts some tar on it, sends him down the Nile, and he's rescued by Pharaoh's daughter. And not only that, but Miriam, who I guess is pretty old now, she's maybe approaching her 20s, steps out of the bushes, out of the reeds, and says, Pharaoh's daughter, I know a woman who can nurse this kid. and they kind of wink at each other because the Pharaoh's daughter opens up the basket and says, "This must be a Hebrew child." So she knows the kid is Jewish. She knows the baby is Jewish. So she knows that this woman is inviting her to give the baby over to be nursed by a Jewish woman. Not only that, but Pharaoh's daughter pays mom. She gets some kind of payment for it. So all of those heroes that lead up to the saving of Moses, who then is the liberator of the Israelites, were all women. That's an interesting thing to think about, because I don't know that it's fairly clear if you look at it and think to look for it, but you got to know to look for it. So there's a lot more in this, but note the message, note how you can interpret it, and note how the Darshan takes one verse out of the Torah and weaves a whole world that's not in the Torah. He may have picked it up from existing stories and existing understandings, but it's not in the Torah. Okay, so that's one story. The other one has to do with Noah. Now, I don't know if you've ever taken a close look at the Noah story, but God comes to Noah, and he says, "Build me an ark out of wood." And Noah builds the ark, and in the context of the story, and this often happens in biblical literature, time has no relevance. God says, "Build an ark," and it's like the next day there's an ark, and the ark is 200. I didn't check this out, but I believe it's like 200 yards long and 50 yards high, and there were no power tools in those days. Just keep that in mind. And so it's as if Noah built the ark overnight, and the animals come in 2 by 2, and then the family and the flood happens. Well, the Darshan in this story takes a logical point of the idea of building a huge boat by oneself without something as simple as power tools, and does a couple things. First of all, again, getting back to the biblical story, Noah has no dialogue whatsoever in the whole story, from the building of the ark to the flood, to getting off the ark, and what happens after they get off the ark. Noah says not a word. Not one word of dialogue is attributed to Noah. So the Darshan looks at this story and says, well, how did this really happen? If it happened, and he believed it happened, how did this really happen? Well, it doesn't take. Rather, let me put it positively. You can't instantaneously build a 200-yard boat. It takes a while. Not to mention that you imagine that Noah lived in the desert. He lived in the desert. So where's he going to get trees to build the ark? So the Darshan says, all right, he gets the command from God, and he plants trees. What else is he going to do? And so how long is it going to take for trees to grow big enough to chop them down, turn them into boards, and build an ark? Well, it's a couple of years, right? I mean, maybe 10 years? I don't really know. But so 10 years, and he's sitting around, and he's waiting for the trees to grow. And meanwhile, people come and go, and they say, well, Noah, what are you doing planting a forest in the middle of the desert? And Noah says, God is going to bring a flood because all you guys are really bad, and God's going to wipe you all out. And they say, nishka felech, it doesn't matter. They go on their way, and they live the lives they're going to live. The trees grow, he chops them down, he turns them into boards, and he starts building an ark. And how long does that take? It's not an overnight procedure. Meanwhile, the people from the neighborhood are coming and going and coming and going, and they're saying, what are you doing? It's in the middle of the desert. What are you doing building a boat in the middle of the desert? He says, there's going to be a flood. Why is there going to be a flood? Because you guys are bad. And if you don't repent, God's going to bring a flood. Finally, the boat is built, and miraculously, and that's the only way it could happen, 2 by 2, all the animals in creation come, and they start boarding. And again, the people come by, and they say, what's going on? Noah says, look up. And they look up, and the clouds are starting to gather, and they still don't repent. Now, and then the flood comes, and the story goes the way that it goes. So what's going on in that story? What's going on in that story? You read the Bible story, and God says, it says of God, I think it's a narrator who says this, People are bad. They don't identify the number of generations, but the tradition says there's 10 generations, and people are bad. And God says, got to start over again. Now here too, in a Bible class, some other context. Well, no, never. I don't want to correct myself in terms of what I was about to say. So God gives the command to build the ark, and it takes what? It's got to take 40 years, 30 years. Let's be generous. 20 years. Growing the trees, making the boards, building the ark, people going back and forth. And the people are given ample opportunity to do what in this story? They're given ample opportunity to change their ways. And they don't change their ways. They continue sinning, else there would be no point in bringing the flood. And it gives Noah a voice in the whole goings-on, which is to say, he's no longer a passive participant in just obeying God's command. He's obeying God's command, but he's also doing what he can do to change people's behavior. And in the mind of the Darshan, the fact that these people don't change their behavior means they're pretty rotten. They're pretty rotten. And so when the time comes to destroy the world, we might argue about whether it's still a moral thing for God to do, but at least it gives God's behavior more logic, more explanation. So what goes on in this story? Noah gets a voice, and God gets some patience. And so the Darshan is changing both the character of the man who built the ark and changing the character of the very God who brought the flood. And so that I see, that's what I see going on in the story. Now the story, I said at the beginning that these kind of postmodern-ish stories are not only interesting in and of themselves, but because they exist, they kind of give us permission too to make our own midrash, to make our own interpretation. And what the Darshan is doing here is he's going against traditional theology. He's going against traditional theology. This is a very different God than is in the Bible. And we, as modern Jews, have that same permission for us to explore the nature of God, the nature of theology, the nature of our relationship to God, and what we can ask of God and what God asks of us. And when we think God is asking of us something that we don't agree with, it teaches us, well before the birth of modern liberal Judaism, that we have the opportunity, maybe even the right, to explore and change our ideas as we see things differently from our predecessors. Shabbat Shalom. So we continue on page 282 with the Alenu. We need some ark opening action. Please come forward. Page 282, and I ask you all please to rise.
Alenu shabeach ladon hakol, latek gdula yotze breshit, shelo asanu kugeye haratzot, velo shamanu mishpachot hadama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vegor alenu ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. These two are arc-opening stars. Is this family on your shirt? Is it Shabbat Shalom?
It's David and me
Oh,
from
David?
Bat Mitzvah.
Ah, very nice. We are on page 295. We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own. If you're here and because you have a yard site and I mention the name of the person for whom you're here to acknowledge their passing, please feel free to rise. Sylvia Barr, Diana Berman, Bernard Cohen, Marks Cohen, Tilly Cohen, Leo Flax, Jules Fogelman, Margaret Friedman, Sally Gilbert, Rebecca Goldstein, Bertha Goodstein, Helen Hertzberg, Irving Hershon, Charles Holmes, Samuel Lebovitz, Samuel Luger, Jacob Perlman, Todd Sarnoff, Irvin Scher, Walter Salauka, Marjorie Silverberg, Peter Sussman, Samuel Weil, Sigmund Winnick, Monica Young. Zichronam livracha, may their memories all be for a blessing. Please rise. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, v'yalma divarach chirutei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chai echon v'yom echon, v'chai yedecha beit Yisrael ba'agala u'vizman kariv yimeru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach, v'olam ul almei almaya, yitbarach, yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'yit hadar, v'yit alev, v'yit halal, shemei d'kudesha b'richu. Le'elam in kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran v'yalma v'yimeru amen. Yehei shalom rabba amin shamaya v'chayim, Alenu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu ya'aseh shalom. Alenu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us, to all Israel, and to the entire world, to which we say, amen. Please be seated. So we got a lot coming up here on Planet KI. Let me find my notes. Probably. Here we go. Sorry. We've got several significant birthdays. Lucille Larich, 90th. Alan Morrison, 95th. Neil Kramer, 75th. And Sarita Silberg, her 94th. 28th of August, we've got our Welcome Back Barbecue. September 2nd, our first family Shabbat B'Yachad. September 10th, Shabbat Out of the Box. September 10th, Henry Morse Bar Mitzvah. September 9th, by the way, we're going to be honoring the board of this august institution, and so I hope they all come by. We've got a little tchotchke for them. First day of religious school, September 11th, and then Zachary Slinker's Bar Mitzvah is the week after Henry's on the 17th. And one last one. On September 18th, I hear I'm giving a lecture, and there's brunch that goes along with it. I still haven't decided exactly what I'm talking about, but it has something to do with creativity, Jews in science fiction, and Nick Bones. So there's a lot going on. We conclude with Od Yavo Shalom Alenu, sorry, page 353. I seem to have misplaced my pick. That's because it's on the floor. Thank you. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od yavo shalom aleinu, Od yavo shalom aleinu, ve'al kulam. Salam aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam, salam, salam aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam, salam. Od yavo shalom aleinu, Od yavo shalom aleinu, Od yavo shalom aleinu ve'al kulam. Od yavo shalom aleinu, Od yavo shalom aleinu, Od yavo shalom aleinu ve'al kulam. Salam aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam, salam, salam aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam, salam. Please rise, find a friend, a neighbor, a spouse, a child. And if you happen to have a child on the bima here, could you please come forward? Shoulder, nobody eats lunch alone. Lenny needs a friend. I don't know that lady's name, but she needs a friend too. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God bless us all and care for us. May God's light, the light of kindness, the light of grace, but the light of creativity, holy creativity, may that light shine upon all of us. And as we leave the sanctuary tonight, may God's presence always go before us and give us a life and a country and a world and a universe of shalom, of peace. Amen. Could you all join me over here? Are you able to do motzi? I didn't tell you before, but you don't need to practice or anything, do you? All right. And Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pari hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho v'yahava u'v'ratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila Lemikra Kodesh. Pick it up. Mitzrayim kivanu v'acharta v'yotanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha v'yahava u'v'ratzon hinchalta. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabbat. Amen. L'chaim to you all.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam.
Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Thank you. Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Nicely done, guys.